What's up, everybody? Today we're talking with Norby, the Director of Technology at Offworld. This is a follow-up interview to the one I did back in April, where we discussed a lot of the tech going into the development of Unreal 5 for Squad. So in this interview, we're going to talk a little bit about the release of 9.0 and some continued development for the game. So hit the subscribe button, leave a like, drop a comment down below with your thoughts on the interview. Keep in mind, if you're looking for a copy of Squad and you want 30% off, you can use my code SLAY3K30 at the link in the description below. Now let's jump into the interview.
Norby, thank you for coming back for another talk about Unreal 5, which has most recently been released. We talked back in, I think, about April when plans were made public about the transition to Unreal 5. So I wanted to follow up on some of the things we discussed and kind of get some of your input about where things were and continued progress towards where, better performance and continued development in Unreal 5. So thank you for joining me. So first of all, can you give us an overview of the release of 9.0 and some of those initial key learnings that came from that?
Yeah, sure. So for the most part, there were no big surprises. There's always small new learnings. Even after 6 months almost of playtesting, first closed and then public, there's still things that we don't catch. And then all of a sudden when it goes live, these things are there and we got a hotfix. And we knew we were going to have to hotfix post-release. That's always the process. It's been like this for 10 years.
What does the releasing of the update, for folks that have been involved in playtesting and see the progression and then you release it to the public, how much more information and data can you pull? I'm assuming that's pretty helpful, right?
Yeah, so the total data set is over 1,000 times bigger, even within a few days. And that's incredibly helpful. Before... We gather metrics, for example, on performance per system, but because every system configuration is so different, you often get just a single sample. And then with a lot more player data, suddenly you get a better understanding and better metrics. So that's really good from that perspective, but also a lot more people hunting bugs, reporting bugs, a lot more servers running. A lot of the data limit is on the server side because you need 100 players to fill a server. So we get a couple of matches per playtest, and we get tens of thousands of matches in live. So the server data is much more solid, and we get a lot of learnings there that we didn't before. One example is we did some optimization for the server. We playtested on it. Told the hosts about it, and they turned it on when we were community hosting. They said, well, it didn't really do much for us. So we moved on from that, and now some of them turned that option back on, and now it did a lot more for them. So it seems like it depended on a specific situation. And so even with all the playtesting, we didn't fully cover it, and we didn't understand how much this could do. And so it's great that they're going back to it, and they're rediscovering that optimization that they can turn on. But it just shows that there's never enough playtesting that can match the amount of live data we gather.
What went into the timing of the release? And I asked this question because in the original interview, you said something that kind of stuck with me through playtesting. I've talked about it a couple times, and that was trying to find a point where the playtest version, Unreal 5, matched or operated better than Unreal 4. Can you talk about a little bit about that decision making as to the determinations maybe of when you guys said, okay, we're at that point?
Yeah, so we do get automated frame rate reporting, just anonymous in the back end of this is the FPS, and so then we sort it by GPU, and we hit that threshold that the UE5 version performs better for the majority of players already quite a while ago. So that was not so much a driver for release. It was the maturity of the pip scope implementation more than anything else, where that is the one point where I would say the rendering pass is by far the most custom. Right, this is not much to do with native Unreal anymore. It's really specific because Unreal doesn't have support for picture-in-picture scopes. So this is a very custom render pass, and that needed time to mature until we were really happy with what it does. And you have to make adjustments there for different hardware, for whether people use DLSS or not, right? That makes a big difference for this kind of implementation. And so we had to do tons of work. By the way, the reason we stopped supporting XeSS, the Intel upsampler, because the custom work we would have to do in that upsampling solution to make it work was just more extensive than the other ones. So that's how we ended up deciding to keep on working on it, is just to give that time to mature. That also fixed more bugs along the way. The bug fixing never ends. We fixed a bunch of bugs before release, and we're still fixing bugs now. We're going to keep fixing bugs forever in Squad. But it gives a better experience the more bugs are fixed.
Yeah, and speaking of bugs, I know that at some point, I think it was maybe playtest 6 was when, was that sort of transition from 5.3 to 5.5, I believe? Like, what was that sort of like from your perspective? Because I know from a player perspective, when I jumped in there, and I know a lot of folks said that it was a kind of a backward step with the engine. So, like, what kind of stuff did you guys run into, difficulties and so on?
Yeah, I think the backward step was actually when we merged in a bunch of new content. So we had developed UE5 sort of on a separate stream, and then in parallel developed new content on like a mainline development stream. And then as we decided to delay things, that content was ready. And so we merged it in. But of course, QA bandwidth is limited, so no one had really looked at this content. So this is when the new factions came in, or the rebrand of the Middle Eastern into the Iranian faction. So a lot of content changes there. When we make new guns, the setup can be wrong. So then like the scope on one of the guns was black. These kind of bugs came in due to that content merge and us not testing it before. But for us, it's just a testing app. So we were okay with it. We didn't communicate that clearly. We should have said like, hey, look, we just merged all this stuff in. We haven't tested it yet. It might be broken. Just to clarify the expectations, if you join in on a testing app, you're opting into testing. You're getting an early look at things, but we have zero guarantees that it's fully tested and ready to ship. So we need to be better at communicating what players expect of that. It's not a continuous trajectory. We just added a bunch of new stuff.
Yeah, I think that made a lot of folks stumble, because even when I got on there, I was running into a whole bunch of issues that hadn't been things we recognized earlier, like spawning and kind of getting like teleported briefly and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it was actually sometimes when we were playing some of the new parts that were coming in that got merged in 9.0. I imagine that makes, like, when you're starting to merge content like that, especially separate streams, it makes it pretty difficult, I would assume.
Yeah. Usually the process is that all of QA is focused on that stream before it gets merged in. And but we felt like a lot of the changes were so valuable, the gunplay changes, that we wouldn't want to hold them back, right? It was ready from the design side, and that means it's ready for the players. Let's get it out there.
Now that it's released, what can the player base expect in the near future and maybe a little bit longer term?
There's more hot fixes. There's another one tomorrow. But by the time this goes live, that'll be in the past. And we do get crash reporting live, for example. We found that a lot of players are on like one specific older version of an NVIDIA driver that was only available for a couple of days, and NVIDIA immediately fixed the issue with it. But there's one driver version that's just not compatible with Unreal 5.5, or maybe a larger subset of Unreal Engine, and will crash. And so we added a specific warning: if you are on that driver, please update your driver, or downgrade for all you want to do. Just don't use that one version. And so adding checks for that, because we have over 10,000 crashes of people on that one specific driver. So those are things that we act on, fixing those, trying to improve players' experience that way, because they are easily actionable. Then also looking into more complicated bugs. We're looking at server improvements, just listening to feedback and whatever people find, addressing it. In parallel, of course, new content development is happening, always has been happening. Just like I talked about the flow before, and when it's ready, it gets merged in and then it goes out. So there's a release plan for the rest of the year. And I think we announced the roadmap already for that. So the Ukrainian faction, all that is coming.
Speaking of future, like what players can expect, there's been rumblings of, future iterations of the Unreal Engine, next obviously being like 5.6. Do you have any light that you can shed on, maybe how hopeful you are, what that could offer to the player base and continuing to improve performance in Squad itself?
Yeah, for sure. So, like I mentioned, I think the last time is whenever we look at an engine upgrade, it's at first for our internal workflows and tooling and how that accelerates. So that in the smaller versions, it's often not such a big difference. And with 5.5, we did get some improvements there, especially on the map iteration, the PCG systems. There's a lot of really good stuff in there, and you'll see that in the release cadence, for example, for the maps, right? I don't know if that's announced yet, but I think the community who's been here for a long time got used to a certain release cadence for our map content, and that's going to change because the workflow is so much faster, right? We're able to obviously the art needs to be updated to match that, but as that art becomes available, the level design team can work that much more quickly into an upgrade of a map that players love. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we want to bring it up to the latest and best level of what it can be. So these tooling improvements, they're already there. There isn't something super excited in 5.6 specifically. There is some things that are interested in 5.7 that we're already looking at. So if someone saw the Witcher 4 tech demo, some of the foliage tech is what we're already accessing, trying out in Squad, seeing what that can do for us. So we're definitely looking forward, but 5.6 is more, I'd say, longer term. I wouldn't expect this immediate. It's more we're looking at it for memory optimizations. So one area we have stayed away so far from is level streaming. Squad had never any form of level streaming, so the whole map is ever loaded. And the reason for that is Unreal Engine is infamous for traversal stutters. In many Unreal Engine games, as you move to the level, there's a short stutter because it needs to load new parts of the level. And so that's called level streaming system, where you have only parts of the level loaded that are relevant to you. But that moment of loading creates a little stutter. And that's been a long time problem in Unreal Engine. We didn't want those stutters in Squad. We have stayed away from it. We've experimented with the system for many years, but it wasn't meeting our expectations. But 5.6, it does look much more promising. So those are the things we're exploring right now. So we do have a version of the game on 5.6, and we have builds we're running, we're experimenting with it, but we're only really committing to it and shipping on something when we feel like there's a tangible benefit. And so what you can expect to see, it's not like the thing with 5.5 where the rendering pipeline is overhauled and it just runs a lot better on a range of systems. That's not the case in 5.6. A lot of the enhancements were hardware ray tracing, which we're not using at all. And then the other area would be this kind of level streaming that can help performance in general. But of course, it's a larger overhaul, right? We'd have to go through every single map, set it up for it. So that's going to take some time. Gotcha. And until we have done that work, I can't promise anything, right? If next question is going to be how many FPS is that going to give me, right? We're not there yet. Like, this is looking far ahead in the future.
No, I just think it's interesting to see, again, kind of behind the curtain as to what you guys are, keeping tabs on. Because I learned a lot in the last conversation we had about sort of development and the way you explained it and kind of breaking down what you guys look for in these engine updates that could improve the player experience. And translating that, I think, for the community is important because, there are some folks that are well-versed in it, but there's also a lot of folks like me that I don't really understand a lot of the little bits. And then if I start to see more and more of this kind of information about, hey, this could help that hitch when the map loads. I know what you're talking about there, right? I think that's really interesting.
That concludes my interview with Norby. Much shorter this time than the one back in April, but I just wanted to recap some of the things that went into 9.0, some of the playtests that we saw towards the end there, and then continued development of the Unreal 5 engine with Squad. I know a lot of us had hesitancy around the update getting pushed live before it was ready, but the interesting thing, and something that Norby highlights, and something I gathered from my visit, was the interest in getting the update out there because of the amount of data that Offworld would be able to collect to then work on hot fixes and bug fixes to improve the performance and the gameplay overall. The amount of data points helps them in finding different bugs and things like that you couldn't normally get under playtesting, especially after months of playtesting, because those servers tend to not fill up as much the longer playtesting goes on. That was something that we've noticed with Unreal 5. That was something we noticed all the way back with the Infantry Combat overhaul. Just interest starts to die down and it becomes harder to gather the data needed to be able to make some of the changes necessary. Something that's interesting to me, and something that I just don't understand a lot of, is these engine upgrades that happen, like 5.3 to 5.5, and then eventually 5.6. And understanding that from a dev perspective a little bit more and getting some of that background, I think is really helpful for me to better understand how game development really works. because I am interested to see how the game continues to develop in the future, given the capability that may come with Unreal 5 and continued Unreal 5 development. So while it's certainly not a finished product, that's something we discussed a while back, that this is just another step along the way. This is kind of opening a door to continued development. It still needs a lot of love. Like, I need my explosions to look like the explosions I'm accustomed to, in one smooth flowing motion and not just kind of a blurry mess. And I'd also like textures to load in the way that we'd expect more frequently, amongst other things that tend to hold back or take you out of the immersiveness that typically is Squad. I will say, however, what I've been impressed by so far is the consistent performance I've gotten across most of the maps that I've had a chance to play in the last few days. Although I would note at least one performance issue was on Sanction Island with an invasion layer where so many vehicles and so much was going on, we dropped down to 20 frames for a brief period. So again, imperfect, still needs work, but I am hopeful. And I hope that you guys have seen at least some confidence grow in the way the engine's operating, or at least some promise as to where it could go in the future. But I would be curious to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed the quick interview and the recap of 9.0's release for Squad. And with that, I'll catch you next time.